If we rewind back 3 years ago to the beginning of 2022, Alpine had an embarrassment of riches. Their driver lineup consisted of Esteban Ocon, who had just won his first ever Grand Prix, a championship caliber driver in Fernando Alonso, and also Oscar Piastri, who has gone on to become a potential future world champion at McLaren. Fast forward to now, and although they still have Gasly, who's a relative equivalent to Ocon, the fact that they felt the need to sign Colapinto before Doohan has even turned a wheel in his rookie season clearly shows that they don't have 100% faith in him, and they don't even know if they'll have the same lineup at the end of the season. 2022 really feels like the year where Alpine were at their absolute peak. Even though they didn't win any races or even score any podiums, with 173 points and 4th in the Constructors, it was by far their strongest ever season in Formula 1, and that is despite having terrible reliability throughout the year. When Ocon and Alonso both returned to Formula 1, it definitely took them a year to get back to their best. Ocon was well beaten by Ricciardo in 2020, and Fernando struggled with qualifying pace in 2021. However, by 2022, they were fully acclimatized and back to their best. And it's no coincidence that with their strongest ever lineup, Alpine looked better than they'd ever done before or since. On the other side of the garage, they also had a Formula 3 and Formula 2 champion in Oscar Piastri, who was just waiting to get his chance. At this point in time, the contract situations of each driver also made things a little bit complicated. On paper, Alonso was the best driver, Piastri was the one for the future, however Ocon was the only one who actually had a contract for the following season. That meant that one of Piastri or Alonso was going to have to be out of the team, because the alternative was to buy Ocon out of his contract, which never looked likely. And now again, Alpine were in the privileged position where in a way, they almost couldn't lose because any combination of Alonso Ocon, Ocon Piastri or Piastri Alonso was going to be a great lineup regardless. However, we know exactly where this story ended up going. Ocon was the only one with a deal, and so he was guaranteed for 2023. Alonso felt disrespected by Alpine that they couldn't give him the same 3-year deal as Ocon, and so he preemptively jumped ship to Aston Martin. And although Alpine thought that they had Piastri tied down, he, out of frustration with Alpine's incompetence, signed with McLaren behind their backs. Even though Alpine tried to make it out as if Alonso and Piastri undermined them, in reality what they did in joining other teams was totally legitimate because they were drivers out of contract. Giving Ocon a 3-year extension was arguably their biggest mistake, because even though he is a very good midfield driver, in hindsight looking at the stunning results that Fernando Alonso was capable of when Aston Martin was competitive in 2023, and looking at what Piastri has gone on to do at McLaren, the best lineup that they should have committed to was actually Alonso and Piastri for 2023. The mess that was the Piastri and Alonso saga of 2022, which was caused by CEO Laurent Rossi, and who since has been fired, it has to be said, was just indicative of what the Alpine team is. Let's not forget that even at that point, they were already on their 3rd team principal in 3 years, and even after Otmar, they have had 2 more team principals since then. When you don't have stable leadership and then start messing your drivers around by not fully committing to either of them, how can you expect them to have any kind of trust or loyalty towards you anyway? When Alpine let Alonso and Piastri just walk away like that, it was embarrassing to see this level of incompetence from a team that had so much potential, and in the end, Alonso went on to prove just how good he still is at Aston Martin, and Piastri in just 1 season has won more races than Renault or Alpine has done in 9 years. If you want to get an idea of just how hard Alpine had to scramble to find a replacement driver that they didn't even anticipate they'd even need to look for, Otmar Zafnauer said that 14 different drivers were on their list as potential teammates for Esteban Ocon. Daniel Ricciardo, Mick Schumacher, Antonio Giovinazzi, and even Colton Herta were amongst the many drivers that Alpine considered, and the fact is that regardless of who they chose at the time, none of them were going to be as good as Fernando Alonso, and so it was almost a guarantee that their driver lineup was going to get worse. In the end, I think Alpine actually got quite lucky that a driver as good as Pierre Gasly was actually available at the time. Gasly was looking for a fresh start away from the Red Bull family, and out of the available options, he was by far the best driver. it really emphasizes the importance of why drivers sign contracts to align with other drivers' contracts, because had Gasly not been available, given that Ricciardo, after being dropped by McLaren, wasn't keen on returning to Alpine, most likely they would have ended up signing Mick Schumacher, given that he subsequently raced for Alpine in the World Endurance Championship. Despite Alpine snatching a relative win from the jaws of disaster, when the lineup of Ocon and Gasly was confirmed, I don't think there was a single person that I knew who honestly thought that this lineup would actually last. We all knew about the previous friction between the two drivers, but even then, although on paper this was a really solid midfield lineup with 2 race winners at the team, it always felt like something was going to implode eventually, and even if not, that the team itself would somehow find a way to make one of the drivers want to leave sooner rather than later. That is something that I really want to emphasize. Teammates don't have to be best friends. That is not a requirement for success. As long as they have respect for each other, a clear goal of what they're trying to achieve as a collective, and clear commitment from the management, then that can still be a successful partnership. However, Alpine was never going to be that. The moment that things started to get tense, it was clear that Ocon was on his way out, and instead of the team still maintaining a sense of respect during this time, instead we got rumors that Ocon might even be dropped mid-season in favor of Doohan. That is the kind of team that Alpine is, that is the kind of team that Alpine has always been, and it's the reason why pretty much every single driver that's left the team has left under a cloud. If we take Ricciardo leaving McLaren in 2022 and being replaced by Piastri as a counterpoint, that was a very tough situation for everyone, and it was made even more difficult by the fact that Ricciardo had a contract for 2023. Despite that, it never felt like the relationship or respect between Ricciardo and Zak Brown was ever lost. They mutually agreed to terminate his contract a year early, and to this day McLaren still has a good relationship with Ricciardo. The same cannot be said of Alpine, Bruno Faman, Flavio Briatore, and Esteban Ocon. The culmination of everything that I have talked about has meant that, whilst in the past Alpine could attract quality drivers like Ricciardo, Ocon, Alonso, and Gasly to the team, when Carlos Sainz actively chose to turn them down in favor of Williams, I think that was a clear shift that great drivers no longer see the potential in going to Alpine, and they don't want to be involved with a team that historically doesn't have great relationships with its drivers. Even though Briatore secured Mercedes engines, and even though the team had a past relationship with Sainz, Carlos actively chose to go to a team that was less competitive because under James Vowles he saw a team with more potential, in large part because of better leadership. That brings us up to where we are right now, which is that after Sainz turned the team down, they finally decided to promote one of their own junior drivers in Jack Doohan. And now, Doohan is a very interesting case because he has grafted at that team on the sidelines since 2022 being their test and reserve driver. And whilst it's great to see a driver like that get his chance, he is not considered to be amongst the best of the new generation. And that is why I think it makes it all the more worrying that before Doohan has even had a chance to properly start his rookie season, his future is already in doubt. It's been widely reported that Doohan's Alpine contract has a 6-race trial period, and that after those 6 races, Alpine can basically choose to cut him for free in favor of Colapinto. I just can't help but feel both frustrated and also sorry for the circumstances in which Doohan is going to have to make his debut. Making your F1 debut in one of the worst team environments, and for a team who you know don't even have 100% trust in you, that is seriously difficult mentally. And that's not even taking into account all of the other difficulties that will come with being an F1 rookie in the first place. In terms of Franco Colapinto, despite really impressing in the Williams last year, after Sauber and Red Bull chose to pass on him, it was always going to be difficult to find a seat. But he has landed in the best position possible to potentially get another chance this year. That environment is going to be absolutely brutal because you will have a rookie sweating bullets at the fact that potentially he's only got 6 races to prove himself, and then over his shoulder he's going to have another driver breathing down his neck every single weekend, just itching to step into his seat. And now these kind of situations are not normal, and just like last year at RB with Lawson and Ricciardo, they are indicative of a team who have destroyed their driver lineups with bad decision making from chaotic management that is trying to pull in different directions. 5 years ago, Alpine were replacing a Daniel Ricciardo in his absolute prime with a two-time world champion in Fernando Alonso, and the fact that now they've had to settle for a rookie driver who they don't even have full confidence in, hence the signing of Colapinto, that just shows you what a massive downfall Alpine and their reputation has had within Formula 1 in such a short period of time. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.